the mouth still like moves, but
Yeah,
it's just like the mask moving up and down. I thought it was a really interesting detail.
it's really cute. I love it. Okay, let's see now. Let's check the stream. We're live on everything. Okay, I really hope our audio is working well. Let's see. I'm not hearing anything so far. Oh,
Oh,
Carson,
yeah, well, yeah, I'm not talking,
can you say
so.
something quickly?
Yeah. Welcome everyone to the talk. We're just getting ready and testing some audio things. Hopefully everything's working. Uh, you never know with these types of things; they can be a little finicky.
Oh, we're perfect. Audio perfectly. Uh,
Nice.
and I mean, we have a little bit of a delay, but that's good. And yeah, we're good to go. So, if anybody is watching right now and you're tuning in, thanks for bearing with us as we audio test. It's a little bit of a weird and kind of disembodied experience to be like in a virtual world, but then like like testing something on like a screen in like a totally different world, like in the Twitch world, and then but kind of like being in both at once. Um, it's it's kind of weird, but funny. Um,
Yeah,
I,
I have I have it open in Twitch on my phone, and it's weird seeing it from two different angles. I can see
yes,
from my angle and also the angle of the camera.
yeah, seriously, it's a bit funny, but kind of but good though. I mean, I know I'm so used to being like in the command center controlling everything via Twitch, and so it's just kind of odd to like be so removed from it. I'm almost like, it's kind of weird. It's like being like the engineer, but like doing it on your, like, it's like working from home, honestly, like, doing
Yeah,
something from far away. It's pretty funny. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna turn this off now. I apologize to anyone who's in the Twitch chat right now because I can't really monitor the Twitch chat and VR chat. So y'all on Steam are gonna, or y'all on Twitch are just gonna be kind of left to your own devices. Um, and that's that's just the name of the game today, I think. Okay, let's see. Just waving at the camera, waving at everybody who might be watching.
yeah. It's funny. I actually have to stand up in order to wave. There's not like a sit down and wave animation.
Oh, interesting. That's so funny. Oh, Excursion SFM is on our Twitch chat, and he says the audio works. So thank you, Excursion SFM. I've got my little virtual desktop, so maybe I can monitor Twitch after all.
Cool.
That's awesome. I'm just going to let's see. Okay, cool. How is it going today, Carson? We haven't talked in a couple of days. What's going on?
Oh yeah. Nothing much. Just working on things here and there. Everything's going pretty slow. I'm
Yeah, I
also.
hear you.
I think I mentioned this before. I'm clearing out my studio.
Yeah.
From grad art at Art Center, and yeah, it's very weird to go through all the things that you thought you were going to work on and then put them to the side, and now you have to look at them again. It's It's very weird.
Yeah, totally. I hear you. I mean, it's like it's always like, I always hate that moment of like nostalgia and like, like slippage as you kind of like break away from one part of your life and then start entering another. I don't know. Maybe it's like cuz I don't know, I hate that whole when you have to do that, and you're like trying to take your next step, but you're still kind of stuck in the past because you're cleaning out and remembering and all of that stuff. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but how's it going so far? Was your studio like pretty pretty messy?
No, I'm actually a very clean person, so it's pretty tidy. The only thing is I made a bunch of big wooden structures for certain exhibitions, and I can't bring those home with me, so I just have to figure out what to do with them. I think I have
Mm,
to like call facilities at the school and have a dumpster brought or something like that. But that's pretty much my biggest problem. I'm mostly moved out by now, but it's weird because I started working very virtually even before all this started happening, and
right.
so I'd like go to the studio and just like not do anything in the studio because my computer was at home.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny to think about like a physical studio. I mean, it's always nice to have like a place, that you can go. But yeah, but when you're working virtually, it's kind of like, well, well, that's, your studio's everywhere. I mean, it was kind of interesting. I forget who it was. It might have been Hyperallergic recently did like a tour of different artists like studios, and they had like a bunch of artists like Claudia Hart and Carla Ganis, on there, but they were taking pictures of their like setup and like kind of their like intense like 3-4 screen multimedia kind of command centers.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was interesting because you think I guess because it's kind of like it's this big intense technological thing, but it's also extremely mobile. You can move almost anywhere and keep working. But no, I do think it's important to set up like separate space for yourself so that you can be focused and all good. um, yeah. Let's see. What time is it? Okay, we're starting in just a couple minutes. Thanks everybody for who's here now watching as we kind of, chat and get ready. Um, appreciate you guys. Let's see if anybody is want to start about to come in. Ah, Louise Lessel is here. Send George another invite. There's always that awkward moment as your avatar kind of hunches over when you take your headset off and then switches to the switches to the AFK mode. It's pretty funny.
Hmm? You can also just.
Oh, we have a visitor. Hello.
Yay! Welcome.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. We're just getting ready now, setting up Twitch streams and stuff like that. Ooh, another person. Hello.
Cool. We're also gonna try to open the Twitch screen here in the studio.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, the more, the
So my
more the merrier. We can kind of beam this to the universe.
cool.
I love your avatar.
Thank you. It's just one of the generic ones. I did go on, hunting for it. um,
Hey, George. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
I found a chair I can sit on.
Well, let me check to see if anyone else has asked for invites.
I know it's kind of like Ollie Ollie oxen free. Like, anybody here? Oh. I just learned actually that VR chat doesn't work on Mac.
Yeah, it doesn't work on Mac or I think Linux either. I think it's
That's
all
so
just
annoying.
Windows or Oculus Quest.
I totally
Yeah.
thought that it did. That sucks for all of my Mac heads out there. I'm sorry
Yeah.
I'm sorry for anybody watching the stream who has a Mac computer. My my apologies. Maybe when VR chat leaves beta, they'll expand.
Yeah, it's weird too. So I use a Mac, but I use Boot Camp to
Right.
use Windows on it.
Hmm.
But I think with the next version of Macs, Apple is uh, going to completely get rid of Boot Camp. So
No.
if you have a Mac, then you just can't do any gaming, basically.
That totally sucks. Another
Yeah,
example
there's actually
of
really, yeah. There's actually a really interesting history of why Macs don't are normally considered like not good for games, and actually it was because the like first Macs were actually really good at gaming. Like a lot of I think Doom was very popular on the Mac back then, but
yeah.
that kind of got associated with making the computer kind of like a toy rather than a work tool. So Apple started like actively discouraging people from like making like Windows or not making like games for Mac or like advertising games on Mac. And that was like a whole thing when they started to like really ramp up the like Apple IIs and Apple IIIs, I think. Um, and then that's just evolved into now game developers just don't make games for Mac anymore. I'm probably getting the history a little bit wrong there, but yeah, it's like this whole thing.
It's so frustrating, when platforms decide to be so, monolithic like that. And, like I don't know, I'm such a fan of, cross platform software, and it's such a shame. I mean, that's the reason. I mean, I just moved from Mac and I bought a PC because like just, in the past couple of months, because I was sick of it. I was like, this is terrible. I mean, it's I hate to feel, you buy this technology, you spend all this money, and you want to feel unlimited. You want to feel free. And
Yeah,
it's just a
yeah.
total bummer when you don't. Um, okay, so it's now just a couple minutes past 11. I think we'll give like some folks like maybe 10 minutes or maybe just under 10 minutes to join us. I know that sometimes there's issues with booting up and logging in and all that kind of stuff. So we'll just hang out for a couple more minutes before we dive in. And anybody watching on the streams on Facebook or Twitch, I am trying to monitor as best I can. If you have any audio issues or anything's going on, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to to monitor it and fix it if it comes up. But thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, I'm checking on the Twitch chat now. I actually want to mention something. D Solid State says that Apple wants to get rid of all third-party technology, and that's definitely. I noticed that with making my virtual show. I made that an application that was ported through Unity, and every time someone opens it on Mac, they have to like go through another menu or like go to like the system preferences and like make sure it's like cleared or something like that. And it's just really annoying for game creators to even publish on Mac, which really sucks. But
That's so annoying.
yeah, and then they also got rid of 32-bit applications with the last update. And that one, like a lot of my games that I have like saved up now just like can't run, and a lot of like older applications that I had like weird applications that people would make that I'd use for my art just don't work anymore. Uh, so yeah, Mac is or Apple is definitely clamoring down on independent developers.
Ay, ay, ay. It's a it's a dangerous world out there for anybody working in this field. I mean, things can change on a dime. Um, oh, hey, Thorn.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Okay, awesome. What time is it? Oh. It's also really funny. I mean, for those watching the stream, you can't see this because the camera's pointed this way, but afterwards after we finish the conversation, I'll pick up the camera and move around with it. But it's pretty funny to see everyone's different avatar trying to adjust to the chairs that we have set up for the audience. Like everyone's avatar is kind of like half squatting, half falling off the chair. It's just so silly. I find VR chat just really silly, and that's why I like hanging out here.
Yeah, there's definitely like a levity to it. It's not like too serious.
Yeah, exactly. And just so many funny things happen. It's glitchy, it's kind of weird. Yeah, it's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, there was one of the reasons why I wanted to start exploring VR chat was because I went to a opening in Second Life for this artist Tommy Bruce.
Oh, nice.
He did a Second Life opening because he basically was in the same situation that I was in, where his final show for his MFA got canceled. And so he built his in Second Life. But it was
cool.
funny. There was I think at least 100 people there. And right
Wow,
before they're
holy
about
cow.
to start talking, yeah, it was really cool. He's a part of the furry community, so I think all of his furry friends came.
Oh yeah, they're very
um,
tight knit.
and- Yeah, and so there was a moment right before he started talking where this person was playing around with all the props in the level, and he went into this like porta potty, but for some reason the porta potty prop just plays fart sounds, and then he couldn't figure out how to get out of it. And
Oh
so
my
we had to
God.
wait for this person to basically like stop farting to start the artist talk, and that was a great moment. I was just like, okay, this is what I needed, especially like right at the start of all the pandemic stuff. It was like, okay, I needed this humor.
That's exciting to hear about stuff going on in Second Life, because I'm pretty aware of a bunch of like historical stuff that was happening there, like in 2006 and 2007, and even earlier. But I haven't known about anything kind of more contemporary that's going on there. So that's really cool to hear that the platform still really awesome stuff is still happening there. I love to know that these worlds aren't dying out. It gives me hope.
Yeah. It's weird though. It's definitely a very dated platform.
Yeah,
Compared to like this one, which is a little bit more user friendly.
totally.
But at the same time, you can do a lot more with that than you can with VR chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little bit more democratic in that kind of anybody can hop in there. Okay.
Yeah. I still don't have like the right permissions to like upload this space publicly. So
Yeah, that's annoying. But we'll talk about that in a second. Speaking of which, it's
Cool.
almost 10 minutes past the hour, so I think that we should go ahead and get started. So awesome. Cool. Thank you. And so as we get started, I mean, I'm going to change my avatar. I feel like it's only appropriate to, interview you as Magikarp here. Makes a little bit more sense to me. Um, so, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Silicon Valley's first ever event in virtual reality. I'm super, super excited to be here with my seventh lot resident, Carson Lin, or Unhappens, as we have here. And just for a little bit of background, Silicon Valley is a digital parking is a virtual parking lot for digital art. We exist on Instagram and we exist on the net. We have an online residency program of which Carson just finished his program, as well as an online exhibition series. I'm really excited to announce for the first time here, I don't think I've said this publicly before, that we have a major online exhibition coming up that will be launched on September 4th. It's going to be with Most Dismal Swamp in collaboration with New Art City. And that's going to be a massive, immersive, interactive virtual world show. So I encourage you all to stay tuned, and I'll give you some more details on that as it comes up. But today, I'm really excited to be here with Carson Lin. And just a little bit of background on Carson. Carson is an artist based out of Southern California who, through the usage of digital materials, sublime landscapes, and exploration within game spaces, creates artworks as queering of heterocentric photographic conventions and game systems. Carson is working towards receiving his MFA from Art Center College of Design and will be graduating next month. So congratulations, Carson, on that. That's so exciting. What a absolutely crazy time to be a student. What was it like preparing for a virtual degree show?
Oh, yeah, it was interesting because, especially in my department, I think I'm the only person who uses like video games or virtual like anything. Like trying to yeah, it was very weird because I would be trying to pitch like my idea of like, oh, I'm gonna do a virtual exhibition to someone, and they like wouldn't quite understand. Like even trying to pitch myself as like a game artist to a lot of these older teachers can be a little difficult. But it was definitely, I feel like the situation was right for people to kind of like actually understand, what I was going for, especially because it was kind of the only way to do things. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I have used Unity before, but not in this capacity.
Right. So first, I mean, maybe we should take a step back and kind of explain to folks who haven't seen it what your degree show kind of looked like and what it was.
Oh, yes. So my the show is called I Want. It was originally conceived as a like 6-channel video installation in this like public gallery space in on campus at my school. And when I was basically prepared to do my final show, like the week after the school closed down, due to the pandemic. So that was lovely timing there. And basically, when all that started, I decided to recreate that room, that gallery in the in Unity, and then I placed those 5 and 6 videos within that room.
Yeah.
And then after a while, I kind of realized that I was just like recreating the space. I wasn't like actively like experimenting with all the possibilities of making something virtually. So I then introduced this like extra outside space that once you are in the gallery, you can just leave and go to this like iridescent landscape, which I actually took some assets from and put into this VR chat space, so that you could look at what it looks like, but in a more like communal way, because the application that I made for my virtual installation is just for one person. It's like a solitary experience, but this is something that people can actually like, interact with each other in and meet new people in.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, let's talk about this landscape and this world that we're in. And for those watching the stream, after we finish the conversation, I'll take the camera and I'll move around and I'll provide a little bit of a tour of the world that we're in. But tell us kind of how you built it and how this space really relates to that landscape that is in the I Want show.
yeah, I basically built this. I, well, my idea was to go against what I saw in a lot of VR chat spaces, which was kind of this like they try to make things look photorealistic, or they try to make things feel like the outside world. Like there's that VR chat Kmart that is. It's a really interesting space, but it's definitely it's a recreation of reality in this interesting way. But I kind of wanted to go against that, and one of the things I thought would be appropriate would be to bring in the color palette from my final show, which has this really interesting effect where, depending on where you're looking at, the sky changes color.
Mm,
And I wanted to have something like that in here where it's not quite what people would be used to. And then another part of it too is because there's no textures, it's all just like based on like color and code. The file size of this space is really small, so it's a lot more accessible to everyone. Even if you're running a not so great computer and you're not using VR, you're just using like VR chat's desktop mode. Then you
right.
can still run this space. Because I noticed a lot of people were trying to since they were trying to recreate reality, they were putting like all these filters on and all these textures, and after a while your computer starts slowing down, and once you have like 40 people in a room, your game just like freezes up. So I wanted to do something that would be accessible but also visually interesting.
I left my chair. Sorry, guys. That's pretty amazing. I mean, I love that. In that sense, it really is like a world in your pocket. I mean, it's just like a smattering of kilobytes to get this space loaded and to be inside of it, and that's kind of insane to think about. We're inside of such a small amount of data. So in terms of the physical assets in this space, the polygons and the trees and and all of those different things, those I understand that those are taken from different game spaces, and your avatar as well is a kind of like a remix of a Destiny 2 figure. How did you find these different assets, and how did you kind of build the world?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of assets, like the trees that are in here, are actually taken from like Unity's. It was just like a fast set. The landscape itself is built by hand,
Wow.
using this tool called Pro Builder. Basically, it's meant for um, for rooms and that. But I basically just turned it into this like handmade, low poly landscape. And my avatar is actually the avatar that's in the videos for the residency posted. And I basically just took that avatar, and luckily the Destiny community is a very creative community where they have tools where you can rip models from the game. And to my luck, someone included the rig and everything like that. So I just basically imported the model, and it worked right off the bat. The only thing that I did basically was change the texture and set it to this iridescent texture that I used for the landscape.
Oh, amazing. It's really beautiful and so subtle, the kind of pastel tones in here. um and I mean, let's talk about Destiny 2 kind of while we're on the topic, because I mean, obviously gaming is so incredibly important to you and important to your practice, and you've spent so many countless hours, particularly in the Destiny game franchise. um most of your work is actually derived from your experience in game spaces. How did you start getting into gaming? Like, what kind of introduced you to working in this world?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, I've been a gamer for a while. I've played games pretty much my entire life. I think the thing that really got me into thinking about games as an art form was machinima,
Mhm.
and especially machinima during like the 2005, 2006 era. I did a lot of like watching Red versus Blue, and a lot of Halo machinima. I was actually a part of the community for this talk show in Halo called This Spartan Life,
Oh, cool.
which ran. They started in like 2005. It's created by Chris Burke. It's a really amazing series. You can find it all on YouTube. But it's all like talking. It like bridges the gap between like the gaming community and like the nerd community, and then also the art community, where it'll be like, oh, we have this person who created this machinima, and we'll also have like game theorist like Mackenzie Ward on.
Oh,
And it's a
amazing.
really amazing, yeah, and it's especially interesting to look back at that now because I think at the time when I was watching that, I think I was 13, 14, and those concepts, those really heady concepts that were being introduced in the in that show weren't really getting to me.
Mhm.
But now, like looking back at it, I can be like, oh, okay, that's why I think this way because this influenced me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, definitely those machinima shows were a big part in like um, me thinking about games as art.
Well, how forward thinking of programs like that? I mean, these are things that we're thinking about all the time: embodiment, inhabiting virtual spaces, what it means to really live and have this virtual phenomenology as such an important part of our lives. Kind of, before we were really thinking about it in a lot of depth. I really relate to that experience in terms of growing up in virtual worlds, growing up playing these games, spending, at some points of my life, more hours virtually than physically. And how could that not have an impact on you or what you care about or how you view the world? It would be impossible for that to not have a profound impact on you. um, and so I mean, recently, kind of thinking about now, what have you been spending, the most, what kinds of virtual worlds have you been spending the most time in, and like what kinds of virtual experiences are you really looking for?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time in Destiny, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but also games like Dark Souls, the whole Soulsborne series. I think it's definitely most most of these games definitely have like one thing in common, uh, which is where you can create an avatar and you can basically like dress it up how you want to and like create your own like perfect idealization of self. And I think that's why I'm attracted to VR chat too, is because you can actually um, you can make everything like you can make yourself how you want to be in this really interesting way. Um, so I think that's the thing that um, is like really interesting me most about game spaces is like crafting yourself in an interesting way and like trying out new identities. I think it's
Yeah.
a really interesting thing.
I mean, it's so expansive. You can be whoever you want to be. And I mean, that sounds really cliche. And oh my God, I keep leaving my seat. Um, that sounds like, kind of cliche and almost silly, but it's so true and it's so important. I mean, I think that aspect of expanding the self, converting yourself to something else, exploring every part of who you are, is so important for personal development. I mean, I always I forget who wrote this. This is something I read back in undergrad media studies. But so forgive me for not having a citation, but um the idea was that it's impossible to separate the online self from the physical self. What you present of yourself in a virtual world may be entirely different and radically, alternative to how you present yourself in physical space, but it still comes from you. It still comes from inside you, and therefore it's no more or less valid than what you present in the physical world. It's still authentically you. And that, kind of that idea really really spoke to me, because I absolutely think that it's true. I mean, how could you say that, me in penguin form here is not me? I mean, it's still me expressing myself and, presenting my personality. And I think that, especially for, I want to move the conversation more towards thinking about queer art and queer gaming and what it means to be a queer person, in virtual spaces and especially in game spaces. But I think that, when talking particularly about, embodiment, avatar embodiment, but also face filters, augmented reality embodiment, that it's such an important and expansive tool for self-expression and actualization. For instance, the example I always talk about is feminizing face filters, or masculinizing face filters, and how that is such a gender affirming tool that people have available to them to, make themselves appear the way that they feel on the inside. And I know that, for game, take it out of a gender context or a queer context or anything like that. I think that's so important for so many people. Who feel, for instance, powerless in their own life for whatever reason, and they can enter a virtual world and, wield almost godlike, power over, something. I think it's really important, for folks to have that kind of, deep freedom. And I think that your work really, represents that in so many ways, in terms of creating safe spaces. In terms of, there was a line that, I want to talk about your residency too, but there's a line in in the text that you wrote for the residency that you posted on Instagram. There was a line that really spoke to me that said, I think it was, in this world I can be as queer as I want. And I thought that was really beautiful and really profound and really spoke to me as a queer person who spends a lot of time, in games. So thank you for that. Let's I'm going to stop rambling on. Let's talk about your residency and storm and stress, and what you posted on the Silicon Valley Instagram. Tell us a little bit about that project and what you were trying to achieve.
Yeah, so that particular work was based on an experience I had in Destiny 2, where essentially I was playing with a group of like 5 other people, and I stopped to look at this landscape because Destiny 2 has these really beautiful landscapes that are very inspired by the work of Caspar David Friedrich. And I was just kind of like admiring this beautiful landscape and not playing the game, of course. And one of the other characters, or one of the other players, kind of took offense to that I wasn't like just playing the game. And so they called me a homophobic slur and told me to keep moving. Which is such a weird thing, like, oh, I just stopped for a second. Why does that insinuate, that I'm gay? But it was a very interesting moment where I was like, I just want to sit here and enjoy this space that, probably 100 people worked to make. And I was thinking about the labor of that space too.
Right.
And so one of the things that I did was actually I looked online and found out that you can actually get into that space alone. You're normally not supposed to. It's supposed to be something that you can only do in like this 6-player high level activity. But I found there's glitches that you can do to actually get into those spaces. So I made that first the first thing I made was that like 9 grid iridescent rainbow glitch art thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, I went back into the space and recorded the video of my avatar sitting alone in those spaces, just kind of like contemplating.
Mm.
And a lot of that too was inspired by Caspar David Friedrich, like especially with the Rubin figure trope of romantic painting, of like seeing a landscape and then there's a figure and you're looking at the back of the figure and you're supposed to like embody that figure. But it's kind of interesting. A lot of third-person games like completely rely on that in order to kind of get their meaning across. Like you
Right.
always inhabit a person by looking at their back, which I think is really interesting. And that's where the whole Caspar David Friedrich thing, that's where the title came from. Storm and Stress, or the Germanic, I think, is Sturm and Drang. That was like a movement in Germany that like kind of inspired Caspar David Friedrich when he was still in school. And also, Destiny 2 has 2 guns called Sturm and Drang, which I'm actually carrying in the videos.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's so funny. That's kind of, I mean, that's interesting. I have a couple thoughts about this, and it's interesting on the one hand to to hear about the influence of these classical paintings so many years later in terms of defining what our aesthetic experience is now. Like that's kind of insane to think about. And it's also, which is why I think that virtual spaces and what we're building and what we're living in now is so important, because what is that going to do for the game artists 100 years from now, and the kinds of spaces that they're building for folks, and what the aesthetic conventions that we develop today, how that will then affect other people, and the lived experiences of millions and millions and millions of people as they move through those worlds. And I think that like one, highlights the responsibility that developers and designers and game artists, have for the public. But also just like, artists and painters in general. I mean, you could make a painting today that becomes, highly influential, and then someone's virtual experience 150 years later will be entirely defined by, whatever convention that you've, established in that work. And so I think that it's just really, people, I think that for artists, I think it's important for them to understand the importance of their work in a larger context, because it can have ripples and ramifications that move through the world in kind of crazy and unexpected ways. But I also really like, I mean, we're talking about game art and we're talking about machinima, but at the same time, I also really feel like your practice embodies a lot of the traditions of net art as well. I mean, on the one hand, you're physically remixing and kind of messing with the back end of these games, exploiting glitches to access different areas and do different things. But at the same time, through your action and behavior, you're subverting the process of the game. I mean, these games are very fast paced. They're really quick. It's all about, rapidly moving through as many different, PvP rounds as you possibly can to, achieve points or, whatever kind of reward, comes through it, or not even reward, but that kind of rush in your mind as you kind of hit a flow of gaming. And I really like that your work rejects that on every level. Not only are you building separate spaces that are queer friendly, safe, and positive for everyone, but you're also, through behavior alone, rejecting that speed. Creating a slowdown and kind of subverting the process of this game that is meant to be fast paced and really quick, and turning it into something that's slow and contemplative instead. And that's something that, I mean, obviously you're, a very talented coder and designer and, all of those things, but, that's, something that through behavior alone you can do to subvert an entire platform. And I think that that's something that artists who are interested in net art or interested in, dabbling in this world can recognize, that there are small ways, no matter what platform that you're using, to subvert the medium, to turn it inside out, turn it on its head, and kind of repurpose it, in your own way. And as we're all in isolation, as we're all living at home, as we're all, not leaving our houses and fully living online, I think it's important that we think about those things, that we think about like, how can can we subvert these systems that we're subject to their control in ways that are easy and pretty simple. And I really, really like how your work, demonstrates that. I mean, one thing in terms, and then in talking about slowness, I think that kind of also subverts the hyper masculine tendencies of these games to accrue power, to accrue speed, and prestige. It's kind of like like it's kind of like an ego trip for a lot of players to really get into this game. They may have more power or authority or whatnot than they have in different physical spaces. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that aspect of your practice in terms of rejecting some of these systems and tropes and behaviors that are so pervasive and so toxic in gaming, particularly online gaming.
Yeah, a lot of what I do is definitely to like slow the pace down, or to even like let viewers like actively engage with those spaces, or
Right.
actively like think about the spaces that they're in, and almost also the effort that it takes to make these spaces. Like, I think a lot of players take for granted, like, oh, I buy a game and it's $60 and then I play it. But that's also like that could be 200 people working for 4 years to get it to that point.
Right.
And there's almost like this. I don't know. It's weird. There's like this thing in game through like they want to go through games very quickly. They like want to get them over with, even though things that should be like taken slowly and like enjoyed and like really like absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of interesting to see. What I wanted to do was actively like make people slow down and look at like little details. Like, especially I do that a lot in my on my own Instagram. I like find weird little corners of video games and I like take a photo of it, and then it's almost like you can just kind of like sit with that moment for a lot longer. But it's funny because a lot of those like little snapshots, I often take them while I'm like just playing the game as normal, and
Mm-hmm.
so I'll have to like I actually there was one I posted yesterday that's like in this like multiplayer mode in Destiny 2, and I kind of had to wait for a moment where my teammate was away from me so I wouldn't like have my photo interrupted by like someone jumping in front of it or like someone shooting an enemy or something. I had to like wait for like a quiet moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I know it's kind of hard, when you're in like the fast pace of these, spaces, which, are a system of control in and of themselves to, find that space to do your own thing. Um, and so something I want to talk, I mean, this is super related and you've kind of like half answered this, I think, through talking about slowness and finding those moments. But I know that obviously a large part of your work is about queering virtual spaces. And I'm really interested in, how you go about doing this and why this is important, and then sort of beyond that, how can we as queer people employ these kinds of strategies in our lives as we move through and occupy different virtual worlds?
Yeah, I that's a good question. I mean, really the way that I look at querying spaces is kind of going against the systems that are that are already in place.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to do that through glitches. Like I really like the use of using a like error in a code or something like that to create something more interesting. It's actually funny, like, so this whole effect was kind of inspired by there's like a mode where you can like visualize these colors in this post-processing software called Reshade, which essentially allows you to like add like bloom and depth of field and stuff like that to different games. But they have this like normal map visualization tool that kind of really inspired me. But in order to get this specific color in Unity, I actually had to figure out how to like code it from the ground up. And what I
Wow.
actually found is I found someone went on like a help forum and said, here's the effect that I got, but I don't want it to look like this. And then I looked at that code, I was like, oh, that's perfect. So it was kind of this like taking someone else's, not trash, but like, someone's miscoding and like using it in this really interesting way. And there's things that often game developers do to like either like they use it to help with the experience of the user, or they do it to make things look realistic. And one of my like things is like I like to circumvent that, or I like to not really like. I don't try to think about the user experience as much. I like to keep things accessible, but like especially like in my final show, I was talking about how you have the main gallery space, and you also have that like extra uh, landscape. That extra landscape, once you walk off the edge of the gallery and into that landscape, you can't come back.
Yeah, there's no going
to
back.
The gallery.
I had to reload the game a couple times because I kept falling off and getting lost.
But I kind of like that. Like, it's not as like there's something interesting about like the falling off and the like almost like leaving that world behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I found really interesting. And I think there's there's experiences that you can't really get through games if the games are meant to sort of like comfort you or make it as easy as possible. I think that's one of the reasons why I really like the Dark Souls games, is because they're kind of this like undoing of modern game sensibilities. And
Right.
It often like a lot of Dark Souls games, they go back to like what was being game systems that were being used in like early NES games, like permadeath or like stuff like that, where it can be more difficult, but then it becomes a much more rewarding experience.
Well, rewarding for some. As you know, I cannot crack any of the Souls games. It's beyond my even as a gamer, it's beyond my capability. But I'm okay with that. I'm like, you know what? Like, I respect this series for offering, hardcore players, this, but I'm gonna keep my respectful distance. So I mean, in talking about Souls, and these kinds of games that offer this rewarding experience, what sorts of virtual spaces are you really looking for? Like, what kinds of experiences do you really crave to be enmeshed in?
Ooh, that's a
And
good
like
question.
what really excites you?
I mean, yeah, I think I mentioned this a little bit before, but I especially like games that allow you to create your own avatars in them. But I think one of the reasons why I'm especially like drawn to like a game like Destiny 2 is not only does it have that avatar crafting, but it has its own like systems in it, and then you're able to explore those systems as that avatar. Like the game itself, like you can explore different worlds and you can take on challenges and stuff like that. Like I like VR chat because you can create your own avatar, but there's also there's nothing to really go after in a way. It's just a social experience, which
right.
I
There's
like.
no goal. There's no like golden apple to reach towards.
Yeah, and that's also the thing with Destiny is like you can get certain things for your avatar by completing certain like more difficult objectives, and then it can become like the avatar is also a way to like show off like your gaming accomplishments, which is kind of an interesting like I don't know if there's like a real world parallel to that. Like beyond like having like something that's like super expensive, there isn't like a special T-shirt that you get for like graduating college or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, seriously, and it makes me think a lot of, I mean, Destiny's a little bit of a different experience because it's a first-person shooter, but I think more about spaces like World of Warcraft or EverQuest or some of these, MMO fantasy spaces where, the avatar is so important, and you do get certain things from, beating really hard dungeons or, spending so many hours or spending a ton of money on a really rare item in the store to have this kind of status symbol. And so I think that, yeah, I think that's interesting, how that relates to your sense of like having like a reward and kind of showing off. Do you feel like that's really important to you to, be able to kind of demonstrate your accomplishments in a virtual space? Does it
Yeah,
make you feel like there's something like tangible to hold on to from something that, is in some ways somewhat ephemeral?
yeah, I think it's definitely more of the second one, that like tangibility, or that like yeah, it makes it's like a feedback loop in a way. Like it
Mm,
makes the accomplishment feel more real, and then it like inspires you to do more accomplishments, um, which is probably indicative of why Destiny 2 is a free to play game that kind of uses microtransactions to make most of its money.
mm.
Like if that game wasn't addictive, it probably wouldn't make money. The same thing with like Fortnite and stuff like that.
Oh my God, so addictive. It's crazy.
Yeah.
um, so I mean, we've been talking for a while now, and I want to give some time for a tour, but I want to I wanted to, kind of ask you sort of about, so for a lot of artists, who are working in digital spaces, they work in digital rendering or they work in other mediums. Maybe they're not digital artists at all, they're painters or sculptors or what have you. um, but what do you think that machinima and game art can teach the art world? Like what can we learn from these spaces and from these different kinds of game experiences?
Ooh. Um, I don't know. Machinima in itself is like one of those art forms that is very accessible.
Hmm.
Because I remember when I was younger, I would make machinima a lot, and a lot of that was because I didn't have to like go and find friends to then go like get a costume and then get a camera and a tripod and all this kind of stuff. It was like, oh, I could just create this whole narrative with multiple characters, on my own, and I was really only bound to um like the systems of the game itself.
Right.
I mean, like thinking about like Red versus Blue or something like that, you can create a whole story even though your characters can only run, shoot, jump, crouch, and all that stuff. Like you don't need this whole like range of like actions to create a compelling story. And actually, while we've been talking, I've been moving my character's head up and down, kind of like in the same way as like Red vs. Blue has this thing when when a character is talking, they specifically have the character like move their head up and down to mimic like their like mouth movement in this really interesting way. Um, and it's kind of interesting because like as I'm just existing in this space, like my gut instinct is to move up and down to kind of like mimic mouth movement.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, there's like it's really interesting how you can do something so simple like just move your mouse up and down to mimic, head movement, and it can create such a interesting effect. Um, and I feel like that's definitely something that is good to learn. Is like you don't need to go like all out with like creating elaborate worlds and like getting all these like sets and actors and all this kind of stuff. Like the digital world, it allows you to create something really interesting by just by doing very minimal things,
right.
which I think is really great.
And I think that that's something that, absolutely, that folks, it's accessible in that, I mean, obviously there's certain paywalls, but there's lots of free games, lots of free universes. It's creative tools that are available to you and that are oftentimes easier to use than like 3D rendering platforms like, Blender or Unity, which is a little bit of a learning curve to learn. But in a space like, we were just talking about Second Life before the chat came on, there's really, really easy ways within that game to build objects, place objects. There's a whole social community of folks that can help you. And I think that those are things that the art world can learn, is that expansiveness, and also that you know I think that when you work in games, the system is more tangible and that you can really see your constrictions. Whereas sometimes in the physical world, those constrictions are oftentimes invisible or socially put in place, and it makes it more difficult to navigate. And I think that expansiveness, that ability to see the constraints really plainly, is something that the art world can look to and use, for artist practice, curatorial practice, gallery practice, what have you. And I think as well, especially as we move online, I think that the social aspect of playing games is something that we can look to as well. I mean, I would way rather, go to an artist talk in VR chat than watch a stream, not that, no offense to anybody who's watching the stream right now, but you know what I mean? So yeah. And I have, kind of one more question, as we wrap up. Where do you see the future of machinima and game art going? And maybe if you don't, if not necessarily what do you see, but what do you want to see?
Ooh. I mean, at least for machinima, there's been a lot of different VR artists or even Twitch streamers doing improv machinima in a
Oh,
really
cool.
interesting way. One of the most popular right now is this guy named Wayne Radio TV. He did this series in Half-Life where it's like a VR mod for Half-Life 1. And so he's
Oh, crazy. Oh,
basically going through the events of Half-Life 1, but all of his friends are taking over the roles of the AI. And so they do improv skits or make fun at the whole the systems of the game and stuff like that. It's very reminiscent of Red versus Blue, the first season of Red versus Blue in that way.
Right.
But it's a really amazing series. I think the full title of it is Half-Life VR, but the AI is self-aware. And it's just a really fun thing, but it's interesting to see how people are really pushing the whole Twitch platform to do more improv things. And actually, improv machinima is not really something that's very new. Especially in the early days of machinima, there was the Ill Clan who would do these improv live skits inside of Quake, and then they'd record those and put those online.
Cool.
And so I feel like it's definitely going to become something more live, something where people can interact in chat and then make decisions and all these kinds of things.
That's
But I
crazy. It's
think
kind of,
definitely going
sorry.
to involve more people. Oh, yeah. I was just going to say it would definitely be something that involves more people, more participants, because that's something that VR and digital worlds definitely allow us to, and even Twitch integration of things allows you to incorporate more people in it. And even even when making a Unity game, in my I Want final show, that the screens from that are actually a free asset. And actually, there's a lot of things in that game that are made by other people, and then I kind of push or patch them all together. And so I think definitely the future of machinima and stuff like that in game art is going to definitely involve a lot more people and a lot more collaboration.
Absolutely. And that's so awesome to hear. I think that that's something that, I think of machinima as happening in the game, but I rarely think about what's happening outside the game. Twitch, these other platforms. I mean, we're on Twitch right now. All these other platforms that are connected to it and kind of the wider ecosystem. The game is not happening just in the worlds, it's expanding out of that world, and that world has tentacles that extend to all these different places. And I mean, that's very similar to how we think about the expanded internet art object as not existing in one place, but existing as this multi-sided experience, that's, a continual process of happening and becoming. And I think we can think of game spaces as doing the same thing. And, I think, a final note that I'd like to say is to folks listening in is that we need to pay attention to these platforms. I mean, if we're experiencing things via Twitch, thank you, Twitch, for hosting us right now. Hashtag Twitch partner. But, we need to, think about like what those systems are doing and how they're controlling us and how they're constricting or enabling you know all of the experiences that we have, and looking past the frame into what's happening. And it's really easy to get really excited, and I think I'm really excited, but I also want to try to remain critical at the same time of like who has access to these things, what are these streaming platforms and what are the game platforms, how are these two things working together to enable or to prevent us from doing certain things. So yeah, I think that kind of gets us towards the end of our conversation. Is there anything else that you want to talk about or to tell the audience? I mean, is there anything, for instance, is there anything that you're working on or any idea that you really want everyone to leave thinking about?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. I mean, I'm working on some new things. I don't know what I'm allowed to announce yet publicly, so I'll keep most of that stuff on the down low.
So everyone will just have to
I'm
stay tuned.
Yes, everyone will have to go to my website.
It's carsonlynn.com,
and
everyone.
look at it in the future.
I'll drop the link in the chat afterwards. Sweet. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, everyone who's on the Twitch and everyone who popped into our VR room for, however long or however short. We really appreciate you. And now I think that let's just hang out and we can chat about whatever. And I will, grab my little camera and take us on a little tour. I wonder where my camera went. I lost my little window box.
It's right over here.
It's here, but can I grab you, little camera box?
You might have to unpin it through your through that little touchpad thing.
I might need a new avatar because I don't have any hands, so it's really hard to see. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I found it. I found my little camera. Okay, VR chat, if you guys are watching the stream because I tagged you a ton of times, please make the stream camera easier to use. That's all I ask for. It's my one desire.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm watching the Twitch stream now, and your hand of your avatar went in front of the camera like you would see in real life.
Oh,
it was a very funny moment.
There we go. Now I've got the camera and I'm holding it, and we can kind of walk around. Hi guys, this is the space that we're in for everyone, and these are all the empty seats of our ghost talk. For those who've been watching us, this is kind of what we've been looking out at the whole time. We've got this beautiful world that Carson built. Over pretty rapidly. You kind of threw this together really quickly. I was really impressed. Yeah,
actually a lot of the work that I did for this was basically just taking assets from the final show that I did, which was all made in Unity. So actually porting everything was really easy. Like I just especially for the color of the of everything, that was basically just a copy and paste of a simple text document that contained the shader info. I thought it was going to be a lot more complicated complicated than that, but I'm very thankful uh, for VR chat using a very accessible engine to do their coding.
You look so stoic and like beautiful in this landscape. Like you match it so perfectly. It's kind of amazing. Um, Here, follow me, Carson, and let's do a little walkthrough. Because if I get too far away from you, then I can't hear you anymore.
Oh yes, I'll stick close by.
Isn't it just gorgeous in here, y'all? Like I'm obsessed.
Yeah, one of the things I definitely do when I create virtual spaces is I like your camera position to kind of have an effect on or like what the game space is looking like. One of my first experiences with that, I made this little game. I think I actually called it Walking Simulator. But I used a particular glitch where the game's skybox doesn't have any information in it, so it just repeats other pixels that the game is seeing, and it creates this like you can almost like paint with your camera. And like part of my reasoning for doing that was because a lot of people, when they think about walking simulators, they only think about the walking part. But looking is just as much as an important element
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
really any game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we think about motion and movement and action, but absolutely, I think that vision is so important. And I think that that's amazing, and that's also frustrating for folks who are who are visually impaired in some way. And I'm sure that there's certainly plenty of
Yeah.
games that are not based on vision and are more based on audio or touch or what have you. But no, absolutely, looking is so important, and I always really appreciate games that accommodate for that like games like I loved, for instance, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for that reason. It's because that game is so much about perspective and looking and walking. Yes, it's about exploration, but looking around and using different viewpoints and using this little telescope to like see something really far off, and then how that relationship of like moving and looking relates to the landscape. I actually wrote a paper on it during my master's on the phenomenology of the landscape of that game, because I was just so
Oh
in
wow.
love with it. I was just absolutely in love. I thought it was so kind of amazing how all of those things worked together in that particular game. And there's so many other games that do similar things as well.
Yeah.
And you guys can see kind of sorry for my shaky hands, but as I move the camera around in a circle, you can see the sky changing color. And it's so subtle, but it really makes an impact and a difference. And depending on the how you look at it, it's really different. And it's kind of like it reminds me kind of La Turbo Avedon's work. Like, what is it, Permanent Sunset? Is that the name of it? Where she
Yeah.
goes to
Yeah.
different worlds and showcases the sunset. It's almost like you're in kind of this perpetual but also ever changing sunset that's constantly fluctuating. And it's almost like a freaky feeling, like when like you get that kind of like it's like that kind of like it's like you're caught in twilight is the best way to describe it, I think. But like a kind of
Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
pinky pastel twilight. um wow.
Well, yeah. Game skyboxes have always been really interesting to me, because especially in like older games, that's kind of like where you would do most of the world building,
Right.
because it's just basically like you could basically just put a JPEG uh in it, and you can make it as detailed as you want, versus like the foreground, which you're kind of limited to the whole like whatever your limitations are for the actual game. I think of that especially with I mean, one of the first games I got really into was Halo 1, and that game used the skybox really well, because when you were on basically in Halo, it takes place on this like ring world, and when you're on the Halo in the skybox, you can see the actual planet like loop around, because this whole ring superstructure. And that was kind of a really interesting thing to see the Skybox actually take advantage of. And a lot of games do that too, where they use the Skybox to tell a more detailed story.
Right, right. I know, and that's so interesting too, because I think that people like really think of like, because that reminds me as well of like just like classic net art and using different parts of code in these kind of like, basic but ever present portions of websites to kind of turn the whole system upside down. And I think that there's a really strong relationship between game art and net art that is often not like put together, because I think that people either really consider themselves like a machinima artist, a game artist, or like a net artist who's like fucking around with code. But I think that they're like really sister practices in so many ways, and there's so many similarities between them. And I see that this kind of the Skybox is a really great example of those kinds of linkages. So we've been blabbing on for an hour now, and I just want to, and so we're gonna wrap up really soon. But if anybody has any questions for us, please drop them into the Twitch chat, and we'll tackle them. If there's anything going on, please let us know. I think we lost some folks, but yeah, we'd love to chat with you guys if anybody has any questions. So please let us know. In the meantime, I want to talk about what I'm playing right now. I am so obsessed with what is it? What oh my god, I just forgot the name of it. Jesus, why is this happening? I'm really obsessed with Watch Dogs 2 at the moment. There we go, Watch Dogs 2. Because it's set in my home city. It's set in San Francisco. And I've obviously played like Grand Theft Auto and, different games that are set in, major cities that I've been to. But never like my home city, like the city that I know the best, that I drive around all the time, that, I take the train through and, have a really a physically embodied relationship to, kind of be virtualized in that way. And they did such an amazing job. It's so fluid. It's not, like GTA San Andreas where things are like kind of chunky and clunky. It's ultra smooth, ultra high definition, and it's like I'm there. And it's just so bizarre that like I'm playing in this virtual world that's like it's obviously different, but it's nearly a one-to-one of my physical experience.
Yeah.
And it's just been crazy, and that's been the thing that's kind of keeping me sane through quarantine, is like I'll get in my little car in the game and I'll drive to Mission Dolores Park, which is one of my favorite spots in the world, and I'll go hang out there virtually, because I guess I could go sit in the park physically, but I haven't. But that's been keeping me from going crazy recently. And it's been working. Like it really feels like I'm there.
Yeah, I kind of have the same experience with GTA 5, because it's a recreation of Los Angeles.
Right, of course.
But it's also this weird thing. Yeah, it's also weird because I live in Ventura, which is a little bit outside of Los Angeles.
I didn't know you lived in Ventura.
It's like, it's like just a little bit removed. Like I'm not like, oh, this is where I used to go. This is like, oh, this is where I would go if I was doing something like special in town, and I also had to like kill some time or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like just a little bit more removed than your experience, I think.
Yeah, but I guess that's true too. Like I don't live. I'm totally talking out of my butthole. Like I don't live in San Francisco. I live down in the South Bay. I live in San Jose. Let's be honest. I'm from a very suburban city that's about 45 minutes south of San Francisco. But I work in San Francisco. My job's up there, and I go there. Before quarantine, I was going up every single day. But no, I don't necessarily live there. So I feel you on that too. But I don't know. I think that this is important, and it's interesting that because I also think this is kind of problematic, right? Like you've got these virtual spaces that are one-to-one recreations of the real world. Is that awesome because we have this opportunity to see real world spaces, or is that like kind of problematic because it's kind of this like condensified, simplified example of a world that is not subject to any of the real world problems or issues. I mean, when you're in a virtual world, for instance, a one-to-one of San Francisco, homelessness is invisible. The biggest problem facing our city, and things like that just become
Yeah.
kind of totally obfuscated in the process. And I mean, obviously in Watch Dogs 2, for instance, I don't mean to slam the game creators because I think it's a really beautiful game, but, and there are homeless people, but the homeless, you don't really interact with them. You can steal money from them. You can, they're just they don't look, they just look kind of like regular people. They just happen to be sitting on the street, and you don't see the devastation that is wrought here. They haven't built the homeless encampments. You don't see, the used needles on the street or anything like that. There really is no tenderloin district, which is, kind of where a lot of the homelessness happens, and where there's a lot of, condensified issues from the city, similar to how in GTA 5, there isn't like really a Skid Row. I mean, there's a little bit
Right.
of one, I feel like, but you kind of, it's like all of the problems of the city just like evaporated. And so you can play this game and imagine that it doesn't exist. So I think that's kind of, but then again, that's a really sticky issue, because if you were to, insert this into the game, like, then that's also problematic too, because then you have this kind of like weirdly codified and very specific representation of something and some people that they have no control over. So I don't know if I have an answer, but it is definitely sticky as fuck.
Yeah. I mean, in GTA, sometimes the homeless people are used almost as like a joke, where it's like, oh, this person's obviously, drunk or on drugs or something like that, and then it kind of becomes like an enemy type rather than a human being.
Yeah.
And
or like an object
yeah,
too.
yeah, and so it's definitely you have to be very careful when representing those groups.
Well, that's why I really love machinima, where people, especially machinima, like there's so much GTA stripper machinima, where they take the strippers and they take the sex workers rendered in the games and put them into new contexts, empower them, or kind of demonstrate their powerlessness in kind of an activist sort of, not sort of way. And I love that work. And I think that, again, that's a really amazing example of how we can use game spaces, subvert those game spaces, and say something really important about the physical world as well. And I think that, for folks who think this is just kind of like really separate from fine art practice and separate from, real world, what people call the real world. I mean, not that this isn't a real world. I think this is real, practice. I think that's something that we can use to argue against it and demonstrate, why this is, really, really fucking important.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, on that note, I want to say thank you, Carson, so much for being here. I know you guys can't see me anymore. I'm going to stick my hand in front of the camera and wave bye to y'all. But Carson, thank you so much for being here. This was so amazing. And it's just so great to hear more about your practice and have gotten to work with you over the past few months. Your work is absolutely stunning. It's really deeply important to me as a queer gamer, and someone who lives in virtual worlds. And I want to thank you for that. And for everyone who hasn't yet seen it, please go to instagram.com/silicon.valet. Go to our account and please check out Carson's residency. It's absolutely stunning. And he wrote a really tender and sweet text as well that kind of accompanies it too. And I think that, if you are watching this, you'll really get a kick out of the work. I don't know, who knows, like maybe we'll have to do a Destiny 2 landscape tour at some point, so that folks can see,
that'd be fun.
Some of the worlds that we've been talking about, and through your eyes we can talk about that. And if you guys are into that, write it in the comments below. Oh, and one more thing before we go. I'm just about to I'll post the link again. If you haven't had a chance, please do consider donating via the PayPal link. 100% of the proceeds are going to go directly to Carson, to thank him for his labor and his time in doing this. Silicon Valley is an unfunded project that we do out of love and for the medium and the form, and for wanting to create connections. So please do support if you possibly can. It would really mean a lot to both of us. Cool. Any last words, Carson, before I turn off the stream?
No, I think that's it. I think we've covered everything.
Awesome. Wave goodbye, and I am going to close this puppy down.